Chapter 69 of the Old Curiosity Shop. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Mill Nicholson. The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. Chapter 69. Kit was no sluggard next morning, but springing from his bed some time before day, began to prepare for his welcome expedition. The hurry of spirits, consequent upon the events of yesterday, and the unexpected intelligence he had heard at night, had troubled his sleep through the long dark hours, and summoned such uneasy dreams about his pillow, that it was rest to rise. But, had it been the beginning of some great labour with the same end in view, had it been the commencement of a long journey to be performed on foot in that inclement season of the year, to be pursued under very privation and difficulty, and to be achieved only with great distress, fatigue, and suffering, had it been the dawn of some painful enterprise certain to task his utmost powers of resolution and endurance, and to need his utmost fortitude, but only likely to end, if happily achieved, in good fortune and delight to Nell, Kit's cheerful zeal would have been as highly roused. Kit's ardour and impatience would have been at least the same. Nor was he alone excited and eager. Before he had been up a quarter of an hour, the whole house were astir and busy. Everybody hurried to do something towards facilitating the preparations. The single gentleman, it is true, could do nothing himself, but he overlooked everybody else, and was more locomotive than anybody. The work of packing and making ready went briskly on, and by daybreak every preparation for the journey was completed. Then Kit began to wish they had not been quite so nimble, for the travelling carriage which had been hired for the occasion was not to arrive until 9 o'clock, and there was nothing but breakfast to fill up the intervening blank of 1 hour and a half. Yes, there was, though. There was Barbara. Barbara was busy, to be sure, but so much the better. Kit could help her, and that would pass away the time better than any means that could be devised. Barbara had no objection to this arrangement, and Kit, tracking out the idea which had come upon him so suddenly overnight, began to think that surely Barbara was fond of him, and surely he was fond of Barbara. Now Barbara, if the truth must be told, as it must and ought to be, Barbara seemed, of all the little household, to take least pleasure in the bustle of the occasion. And when Kit, in the openness of his heart, told her how glad and overjoyed it made him, Barbara became more downcast still, and seemed to have even less pleasure in it than before.
'You have not been home so long, Christopher,'
said Barbara, and it is impossible to tell how carelessly she said it.
'You have not been home so long that you need to be glad to go away again, I should think.'
'But for such a purpose,' returned Kit.
'To bring back Miss Nell, to see her again. Only think of that! I'm so pleased, too, to think that you will see her, Barbara, at last.'
Barbara did not absolutely say that she felt no gratification on this point, but she expressed the sentiment so plainly by one little toss of her head, that Kit was quite disconcerted, and wondered, in his simplicity, why she was so cool about it.
'You'll say she has the sweetest and beautifullest face you ever saw, I know,' said Kit, rubbing his hands. 'I'm sure you'll say that.'
Barbara tossed her head again.
'What's the matter, Barbara?'
said Kit.
'Nothing,'
cried Barbara, and Barbara pouted, not sulkily or in an ugly manner, but just enough to make her look more cherry-lipped than ever. There is no school in which a pupil gets on so fast as that in which Kit became a scholar when he gave Barbara the kiss. He saw what Barbara meant now. He had his lesson by heart all at once. She was the book. There it was before him, as plain as print.
'Barbara,' said Kit, 'you're not cross with me?'
Oh dear no. Why should Barbara be cross? And what right had she to be cross? And what did it matter whether she was cross or not? Who minded her?
'Why, I do,' said Kit. 'Of course I do.'
Barbara didn't see why it was 'of course' at all. Kit was sure she must. Would she think again? Certainly, Barbara would think again. No, she didn't see why it was of course. She didn't understand what Christopher meant, and besides, she was sure they wanted her upstairs by this time, and she must go, indeed.
'No, but Barbara,' said Kit, detaining her gently, 'let us part friends. I was always thinking of you in my troubles. I should have been a great deal more miserable than I was, if it hadn't been for you.'
Goodness gracious, how pretty Barbara was when she coloured, and when she trembled like a little shrinking bird.
'I am telling you the truth, Barbara, upon my word, but not half so strong as I could wish,' said Kit. 'When I want you to be pleased to see Miss Nell, it's only because I like you to be pleased with what pleases me, that's all. As to her, Barbara, I think I could almost die to do her service. But you would think so too if you knew her as I do. I am sure you would.'
Barbara was touched, and sorry to have appeared indifferent.
'I have been used, you see,' said Kit, 'to talk and think of her almost as if she was an angel. When I look forward to meeting her again, I think of her smiling as she used to do, and being glad to see me, and putting out her hand and saying, "It's my own old Kit," or some such words as those, like what she used to say. I think of seeing her happy, and with friends about her, and brought up as she deserves and as she ought to be. When I think of myself, it's as her old servant, and one that loved her dearly, as his kind, good, gentle mistress, and who would have gone, yes, and still would go, through any harm to serve her. Once I couldn't help being afraid that if she came back with friends about her she might forget, or be ashamed of having known a humble lad like me, and so might speak coldly, which would have cut me, Barbara, deeper than I can tell. But when I came to think again, I felt sure that I was doing her wrong in this, and so I went on as I did at first, hoping to see her once more, just as she used to be. Hoping this, and remembering what she was, has made me feel as if I would always try to please her, and always be what I should like to seem to her, if I was still her servant. If I'm the better for that, and I don't think I'm the worse, I am grateful to her for it, and love and honour her the more. That's the plain honest truth, dear Barbara. Upon my word it is.'
Little Barbara was not of a wayward or capricious nature, and, being full of remorse, melted into tears. To what more conversation this might have led, we need not stop to inquire, for the wheels of the carriage were heard at that moment, and, being followed by a smart ring at the garden gate, caused the bustle in the house, which had laid dormant for a short time, to burst again into tenfold life and vigour. Simultaneously with the travelling equipage arrived Mr Chuckster in a hackney cab, with certain papers and supplies of money for the single gentleman into whose hands he delivered them. This duty discharged, he subsided into the bosom of the family, and, entertaining himself with a strolling or peripatetic breakfast, watched with genteel indifference the process of loading the carriage.
'Snobby's in this, I see, sir,' he said to Mr Abel Garland. 'I thought he wasn't in the last trip, because it was expected that his presence wouldn't be acceptable to the ancient buffalo.'
'To whom, sir?' demanded Mr Abel.
'To the old gentleman,'
returned Mr Chuckster, slightly abashed. 'Our client prefers to take him now,' said Mr Abel, drily. 'There is no longer any need for that precaution, as my father's relationship to a gentleman in whom the objects of his search have full confidence will be a sufficient guarantee for the friendly nature of their errand.' 'Ah!' thought Mr Chuckster, looking out of the window. 'Anybody but me. Snobby before me, of course. He didn't happen to take that particular £5 note, but I've not the smallest doubt that he is always up to something of that sort. I always said it, long before this came out. Devilish pretty girl, that.